the way that developed was I was so impressed with that. And then I discovered that the fellow Chaitanya had an organization down in Taos, New Mexico called New Sun Services America. And that was the organization that he formed to bring Ra to this country at the behest of Peter Wolf in Zurich, Switzerland. These are the people that conspired for Ra to come to the United States. And so he did the second 7 years was the same as the first 7 years. The first 7 years was in Europe. And then with the concept of coming to America, he ended up repeating that very same thing. So he taught the same classes, and I think they were quite a bit better here, having had the experience of listening to a lot of the European things, because they were able to record the classes at the time they were taking. We were not given that. And New Sun Services, they did not want that. And part of the concern was if Ra's going to dedicate his life to this and other people are going to help him, there's going to need to be a way to make a living at it. So that was what it was. It wasn't entirely a malicious intent. It was an intent, if you couldn't make a living with this, it would disappear. It wouldn't stay in the world, So, yeah. So at any rate, I went down to take what I thought was going to be a weekend course in whatever this was. 28 years later, I'm still taking those courses. It is that big. What is available to the public is only a portion of what has been put out, okay? I've got a library, you've seen it upstairs, that has hundreds of hours of material that I have not had the opportunity to edit or make into course material that would be presentable. Look, if you're going to put courses out to people, and that was the first thing when I got my cassette tape, listening to, and a voice going on, how are you supposed to listen to this? And individuals are very, very attuned to the acoustical environment. So I thought, okay, I'm going to find a way to get decent recordings of this material. And I'm sitting in a class down there. I've been going to classes for some period of time. And Ra said he would like to come to the place that Teresa Blanding and I were staying in and perform music for us. And I thought, sure, come on. And I said, would you mind if I bootleg it? And he looked me straight in the eye and said, Tom, you can always bootleg me. I took that as the message and the permission that I needed and started bootlegging the classes, because after paying thousands of dollars for classes that we could only take notes that were not even meaningful, we didn't hardly know what we were listening to. So the notes we were taking were pretty worthless as well. Anybody who's had any exposure to design knows you need to take this in several times to get the tip of it. And you need to take it in many times to get the depth of it. So your question was?
Kind of like, how did you ended up being the man for Ra to record and to be with him, and how was like the relationship you had with him?
Okay, that happened as a result of the fact that for well-meaning purposes, Chaitanya would disappear with the courses and they weren't available for years. Ra was not happy with that arrangement. He said, yes, I understand what you're trying to do. I'm a part of it. I agree with it. We all have to make a living at this if it's going to survive in the world. But Chaitanya, 5 years, you can't. So Ra said, you've been bootlegging me for a while. He called me the Boulder bootlegger. I said, yes, with your permission. I wouldn't have done it without your permission. He said, good, you know me. So at any rate, I gave him a couple of classes that I had edited off of the bootleg tapes. And he went, how long did it take you to do this? I said, they were done a couple of days after the class. He said, really? I said, yeah, if I did it on digital format, I could do it a lot quicker. So that was what intrigued him. Then the event about being deported and all that stuff came up, and New Sun Services, Ambuja, Ra's wife, was giving birth to their second child. I can't think of his name right now, but I'll remember it in a bit. At any rate, Jiva. She was giving birth to Jiva. There were complications. There ended up being a hospital. There ended up being hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of hospital bills. Ra had no capacity to pay that at the point in time. So he was asking the New Sun Services people to get on it and get with it, and they just wouldn't move. So that was the end of that arrangement. And I got asked to come to Sedona to record the mystical course that I'm not sure of the date of that at this point, but the mystical course. And I was sitting at one table recording, and Chaitanya was sitting at the other table recording. So the writing was big on the wall for Chaitanya. Why is this other person recording? Because you're not doing what is expected of you. So that's basically how that all happened, okay? And then he came to Boulder to teach the class at the herb school on plant medicine, on rave plant medicine, which is very different from anything that we are familiar with. And he said, would you mind if I come to stay at your place and we do this? You and your wife are in the herb business. You have all these herbalists. I said, I need to put this information out. I was told very clearly it needs to be put out. I said, I'd be delighted to have you. Yeah. So I cleared out my office and let him stay there. And we had 3 days together while that was here. And that's when I really developed a very close relationship with Ra, as close as anyone would ever want to be to Ra, okay? His public demeanor was that of a big bad manifester. But when you had him in a private place, he's a very lovely man, a very mystical, very lovely man. And so that's the rarity of the experience that I had living under 4 roofs with him at different times. I got to see that part of him, which you would never see in public. 5'1", paranoid, insecure, out there talking about stuff that most people would think is phony baloney. We know better, but most people would think is, what's that all about? Another heresy, like we really need that, right? You're a Catholic. Yeah, right. I'm a recovered Catholic, I'm happy to tell you. Jesus is all right with me, but I don't need Catholicism. He wasn't a Catholic. Buddha wasn't a Buddhist, and Muhammad was not a Muslim. This is what killer monkeys do with these things, okay? So at any rate, it was just, it came to me. I didn't expect any of this. And I was willing to go down and pay for the courses and take them because I was intrigued by it. But I never knew that I would be doing it for the rest of my life until I actually had those times with Ra that were different from what most people would have ever known. And it really touched me on a very deep level. I mean, it's very prophetic. Now, after 28 years, I have been watching these prophecies come true. They're clicking off. And we're 5.5 years away from the shift in 2027 when everything is going to shift to a 6-line process. And Ra understood. He was planting the tree. He would never eat the fruit of it. He said the 6-2s are going to carry this into the world. Not the only the 6-2s, but you'll be the first to carry it into the world, and you'll be the ones brave enough or stupid enough to believe that it will have an effect. And he said, I will be very glad if I can see that from wherever I'm at, but I won't be here. So I had a very deep heart connection with him. We both had defined egos, so there was an ego thing, a willpower thing involved, but it's also a heart thing. Ultimately, yes, it's about support and all the tribal stuff, but ultimately it's about love. You do all of that out of love. And what I got to experience in Ra Uru Hu was rather rare. He's a very loving man, very dedicated, loving man. But he didn't ask for this. And it was basically an inconvenience to him that he was trying to get out of his head, which is why he sat in a tree for 2 years, drawing all this stuff that had been put in, the implant in him. He was just trying to get it out of his head. He didn't know it was going to be useful.
People really misunderstand, or they don't understand the experience that Ra had in Ibiza. Can you share something about that? And the difference between Uru Hu and Ra, and how did he come with Ra? Because he couldn't pronounce his own name.
Correct. His name was Robert Allen Krakauer, a very privileged, well-off man in Montreal who had a tenure at the University of Montreal, had a business with employees, had a wife and a child. And he looked at his life one day and just had this hit. I don't know whose life this is, but it's not mine. You've heard the song, this is not my beautiful wife, this is not my beautiful home, how did I get here? And that was the experience he had. And having no idea what was coming his way, he got in his white Cadillac DeVille and drove it down to the drugstore, walked in there, bought a pack of cigarettes, smoked all the time, bought a pack of cigarettes and walked out the backside. Remember the Cadillac? still at the front side, still running. Gets on, walks to the bus station, gets on a bus, goes to the airport, gets on a plane, goes across the pond, ends up in Amsterdam, where he goes across the Platz and goes into this little pension hotel where American tourists stop when they get off the planes, Canadians as well.
And the Cadillac is still running.
Well, I imagine it had been turned off by that time, but this white DeVille, maybe somebody got in and drove it off. I don't know all that story.
Yeah.
But at any rate, we'll get back to it. We'll tie into that because it's quite remarkable. Yeah. But at any rate, he just disappeared. He just got up and left his life. And that's what someone with 11 first lines can do. Just wake up and say, I don't know what this is, but this is not mine. This is not my foundation. He's a 5-1. But he had 11 first line activations in his design. And he evaluated, said, I don't know whose foundation this is. It's not mine. And he got up and left. So he goes into this little pension hotel, and this American tourist says, where are you headed? He says, I don't know where I'm going. I know where I'm going from. I know where I'm leaving. And he said, oh, well, then you want to go to Ibiza, because anybody that doesn't know where they're going, that's where they go. Go to Ibiza. He says, okay. Splenic guy. Okay. And so he jumps on a plane, goes to Barcelona, gets off to the coast, catches a boat, goes over to Ibiza. Lands in Ibiza, wonders what the heck he's doing there. He's got about 200 Canadian dollars left in his pocket. He's wandering around Ibiza saying, I got to get out of this city. I don't want to be in this city. The city of Ibiza is a whole different thing than the rest of the island. And so he catches a cab and goes up to Portofino, same San Miguel area, okay, and Portofino. In between San Miguel and Portofino on the coast, that's where he ended up finding a place to be. And originally, he was just living on roofs. Never rains there. Rarely rains there. I told him it would rain while I'm there, and it did. And he was, oh my God. So at any rate, it never rains. That's why it's all terraced. Like in Indonesia, everything's terraced because whatever drop of water falls on the land, they want it, okay? Because it rarely rains there. So at any rate, he all these boat launches, these little rowinas, they don't use them anymore. But there are all these little huts. And so the people that live there, the black sheep that go to the islands to get away from their nightmarish existence, like himself, they live in these little rowinas, okay, all around the shore. And they basically live on the beach and do psychedelics. And Ra, sex, drugs, and rock and roll was what Ra was really about, okay? It irritated the heck out of his father. But at any rate, that's what he was really about. And so he really got very comfortable hanging out with all these college students and young people, doing psychedelics and hanging out on the beach and doing the sun ceremony at the sunset and the sunrise and living very tribally on the beach. And so he's heading towards his place, and there's a light on. There was a candle. There was a candle on in the place. He didn't leave a candle on in the place. There's a basic tribal rule. If you walk into one of these things and it's occupied, you turn around and walk right out. You don't mess with other people's stuff. It's the law of the land. And so anyway, he steps in, and he had this dog with him. He liked dogs, and he had this dog by the name of Barley Baker with him. And what he remembers as soon as he stepped into that place was, he said, for a lack of a better term, it was like a multimedia display going on in a whirling light, okay? And all I remember hearing was Barley Baker's skull hitting the floor. And I looked at my dog and I said, whatever this is, it just killed my dog. He was pissed off. He was pissed off. And the next thing he knows, he's experiencing this incredible pain in his body. It's burning, hot, gripping. He's in a grip and he can't move. He can move his eyes, but he can't move anything else. He can't even look down at the dog anymore. And for a lack of a better term, he said, it was like a voice, and it said, are you ready to work now, dog? Wasn't talking to Barley. Talking to him. He's a very arrogant, very well-off, very privileged man being referred to as a dog by something he can't understand. The experience of design came through in the first 3 days. The experience of the Global Incarnation Index That's all the stuff beneath the lines, and the prophetic stuff came in the second 3 days, and what he refers to as the gray courses came in the last 2 days. When he walked out after 8 days, when the experience, gone. By the way, there were some human beings involved as well. We'll talk about that. But when the experience was gone and the humans had already left, humans have been named now, but not ready for that to be out. But at any rate, there were some contact people. I don't know that they were human. Maybe they were, maybe they weren't. But at any rate, the dog jumped up after 8 days of apparently being dead on the floor. Jumped up, barking, howling, running around in circles. And that kind of brought Ra out of the experience. And he walked outside. He'd been in this dark room for all this time. He walked outside and he's like, the sun. And so somebody came up to him, because he knew a lot of people there, and somebody came up to him and they said, "Are you okay?" And he said, who are you? What's your name? What are you doing out here? And as much of his name as Robert as he could get out was Ra. As a result of that, and he's squinting at the sun, okay, they called him Ra, the crazy sun god. And from that moment, he went and he didn't want to be, once he got outside, he didn't want to be inside anymore. He had enough of whatever that was. And so he went up in a tree and sat up in a tree. And finally he went down and got a chair and strapped it into the top of the tree so he could sit comfortably in the chair in the tree. Mad as a hatter, okay? And so he ends up sitting up in this tree, and the only thing he would come down for was to use the restroom or to get some water or maybe something to eat, and he'd go back up in the tree. Lived in the tree for quite some period of time. And he was trying to get all this out of his head. So he was drawing all these charts and things that was in his head and writing down what it meant and all that kind of stuff. And he'd throw it up into the air. And he'd come floating down, and so he was Ra, the crazy sun god, who's doing all these art things with descriptions to it on the ground. And so a fellow by the name of Jürgen Sopp would go there every year. He was a German 6'2", by the way. And Jürgen would hear this man screaming. He'd go up and he looked at the papers, and Jürgen had a background in genetics as well as a lot of other things. He'd been all over the world, very, very bright, very, very aware human being, 6'2", looking at the future coming, didn't even know what it was. And he screamed up, he said, "Who are you? What are these? This is important." Ra said, "Go away." That was his greeting to Jürgen. Jürgen said, "I'm not going anywhere. I want to know what this is. You need to come down." He says, "Go away." He says, "This is important information. It needs to be given to the world. You go give it to them." That's exactly how willing our arrogant Ra was to be controlled by something other than himself. 5'1", totally individual manifester. For those of you who know what that is, you know you wouldn't have enjoyed that experience any more than he did. So that's how it all came about from him. And then he came to the States with Chaitanya and Zeno, and then that fell apart, and I was bootlegging, and he saw that I could do this work, and I said if I had equipment, I could do it a lot quicker, a lot better. He said, "Will you buy it or I'll buy it for you?" I said, "I can handle that." He said, "Well, I'd like you to be my sound man. You're half blind, you're half deaf, you'll make a great sound man." And I told him, I said, "Well, I'm going to do it my way. And you're going to do what I asked you to do, because I couldn't stand the reading I got from you with all that damn noise on it." And he said, "Yes, I know. Okay. So he said, "Yep, I'll obey." I said, "Okay, we got it. We got a deal." And I never paid for another class. By the grace of a number of things, the facts never count. By the grace of a number of things, I had people support me to go do this. Jean Marie Swan, lovely woman that I met the first time I was there, who was very well off, and she said, "You've been called out to something." She was she was an astrologer, and she was very much into esoteric astrology. And she says, "I don't know what this is either, but I can't stay away from it." And my first conversation with Jean Marie Swan was, she said, well, you might as well step back because most people can't put up with me and the rest of them don't like me. I said, that's not the experience I'm having. Your name is? And she said, Jean Marie. And I said, well, Jean Marie, I'm rather intrigued by all of this. So at any rate, that's how it all came about.
Nice.
In his eye, wondering why, because of the line, because of the line. When the angels called his name, when the angels called his name.